I never thought I'd be sitting in a rented sedan across the street from my own home, watching my only son's life implode. But there I was. The day had started with my son, Mark, screaming at me, his face red and twisted. "It's time for you to move out, Mom. Tiffany and I want to renovate, and you'll just be in the way," he'd said, his voice dripping with a mix of disdain and entitlement that cut deeper than any knife. For 5 years, he and his polished, passive-aggressive girlfriend had lived in my house, the house my late husband David and I had built, without paying so much as a dime. They were just waiting for me to kick the bucket so they could cash in. But they made 2 critical mistakes. They assumed I was a feeble old woman, and they had no idea my best friend was the most ruthless realtor in 3 counties. So, by the time Mark's Tesla pulled into the driveway that evening, a big red "sold" sign was staked in the lawn I'd spent 40 years tending, and the new owners, a gloriously chaotic family with 5 loud children and 3 even louder hound dogs, were hauling a stained trampoline onto what Tiffany had called the future Zen garden. And the look on my son's face as he saw it all, honey, it was priceless. If you're ready for this journey, make sure you hit that subscribe button and give this a like so you don't miss the updates. And let me know in the comments what city you're watching from. It's always lovely to see where everyone is. All right, let me back up and pour myself a nice tall glass of iced tea, because you need the whole story to truly appreciate the beauty of that moment. My name is Linda, and I'm 67 years young. For 41 of those years, I was married to the love of my life, David. He was a contractor, a big man with gentle hands and a laugh that could shake the windows. We bought our piece of land in Maple Creek back when it was mostly just fields and promises. David drew the blueprints for our home on a diner napkin one evening, and for 2 years we poured every spare cent and every drop of sweat into building it. That house isn't just wood and nails, it's our history. David's hands framed every wall. My hands planted every rose bush that lines the porch. We brought our baby boy, Mark, home from the hospital to that house. We celebrated Christmases and birthdays, mourned the loss of parents, and held each other on the porch swing through countless summer nights. When David passed from a sudden heart attack 6 years ago, it felt like the foundation of that house and my entire life had cracked straight down the middle. Mark was a comfort then. He held my hand at the funeral, helped with the arrangements, and told me, "Don't you worry, Mom, I'll take care of you." And I believed him. At the time, he was living in a trendy downtown apartment with a string of girlfriends I could never keep straight. He worked in tech, making what sounded like a good salary, though he always seemed to be short on cash. About a year after David's passing, Mark introduced me to Tiffany. On the surface, she was perfect. Polished, a high-end personal shopper with immaculate nails, hair that never had a strand out of place, and a smile that didn't quite reach her cold, calculating eyes. She gushed about the house. "Oh, Linda, it has such good bones," she'd chirped, running a manicured finger over my solid oak mantelpiece. At first, I was just happy to see Mark so happy. If she was the one, she was the one. Then came the request. Their landlord was selling their apartment building, and they needed a place to stay for just a couple of months, Mom, promise, just until we find the perfect new condo. My house had 4 bedrooms. It seemed silly for me to be rattling around in it all by myself. "Of course, sweetheart," I said. "Move into the guest suite upstairs. Take your time." That, my friends, was mistake number 1. A couple of months turned into 6. 6 months turned into a year. Their condo search was a masterclass in excuses. Nothing was good enough. The market was too hot. The interest rates were climbing. They were saving for a bigger down payment. Meanwhile, Tiffany began to treat my home like her personal dollhouse. One day, I came home from my weekly bridge game to find my comfortable floral living room curtains replaced with sterile gray linen drapes. Aren't they an improvement? Tiffany beamed. They're much more calming. Another time, she reorganized my kitchen, putting my spice rack, alphabetized since 1985, into a jumbled drawer because countertops should be clutter-free. Each time, Mark would smooth it over. She's just trying to help, Mom. She has a real eye for design. But her eye seemed intent on erasing every trace of me, every memory of David.
They were subtle at first, like a slow-acting poison, but as the years rolled on, the subtlety vanished. It became, "Mom, can't you get a new TV? This one is ancient." Or, "Linda, we're having friends over Saturday. Maybe you could go visit your sister that weekend." I slowly found myself confined to my own bedroom, the master suite, like a dowager countess in her own castle. They took over the living room, the kitchen, the garage. My David's old workshop in the basement became Mark's home gym, and his treasured woodworking tools were boxed up and shoved into a corner. And I took it. For a long time, I just took it. Because he was my son, my only child, and a part of me was so terrified of being truly alone. But they made a critical mistake. They started to believe their own narrative, that I was a dottery old woman who didn't understand the modern world, a relic living in their house. And just when they thought they had me backed into a corner, they forgot who they were dealing with. Stick with me, because you'll want to see how this all plays out. The financial bleed was another thing altogether. I was living on David's pension and my Social Security, which was comfortable enough for one person. But suddenly, my grocery bills tripled. My electric bill went through the roof. I tried to talk to Mark about it. "Mark, honey, the utilities were over $500 this month. Could you two maybe pitch in a little?" He got that look on his face, that wounded, put-upon look he'd perfected. "Mom, we're trying to save every penny for our own place. Do you know how expensive a down payment is? I thought the whole point of us being here was to get ahead." The conversation was shut down before it even began. So not only were they living rent-free, but I was also subsidizing their high-end groceries, their constant use of the washer and dryer for their expensive athleisure wear, and the charging of that damn Tesla in my garage. The last straw, the thing that finally woke up the sleeping giant inside me, was about David's armchair. It's a big, worn leather recliner. It still has the faint scent of his pipe tobacco and Old Spice aftershave. The leather is cracked in places, and the right arm is worn smooth from years of his hand resting there while he watched the evening news. It's my spot now. I sit there every morning with my coffee and every evening to read. It's the closest I can get to feeling him with me. One Tuesday, I walked into the living room and Tiffany was standing there with a tape measure with two men holding furniture swatches. The armchair was gone. My heart stopped dead in my chest. "Tiffany," I said, my voice dangerously calm, "where is my chair?" She didn't even look up from her swatch book. "Oh, hi, Linda. We were just getting some ideas. Don't worry, that old thing is in the garage. We're thinking a nice, clean sectional here, something in a dove gray or perhaps a grayish." I saw red. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I walked right past her, out to the garage, and saw my husband's chair shoved against a wall piled with Mark's stinking gym bags. I spent the next 2 hours wrestling that chair back into its rightful spot by myself. It took everything I had, but I did it. And I waited. When Mark got home, Tiffany met him at the door, whispering furiously. He walked into the living room, his arms crossed. "Mom, what's this all about? Tiff told me you made a scene." That's when I finally let loose. I told him everything about the disrespect, about the erasure of his father's memory, about being made to feel like an inconvenience in the home his father built for us. He didn't hear a word of it. He just saw it as an attack on Tiffany. "You're living in the past, Mom," he shouted, his voice echoing in the house. "This place would be worth so much more if it wasn't full of your old junk. Tiff is trying to help us build equity." That's when the word "us" finally clicked. He wasn't talking about him and me. He was talking about him and her. This house wasn't ours anymore in his mind. It was theirs. And that's when he delivered the final blow, the words that started it all. You know what? This just isn't working. It's time for you to move out, Mom. Stephanie and I want to renovate, and you'll just be in the way. You can find a nice little condo somewhere. That night, I didn't sleep in David's bed. I didn't sleep at all. I sat in his armchair, a fire I hadn't felt in years building in my gut. He wanted me out? Fine. But I'd be leaving on my own terms. At 7 a.m. the next morning, my phone was in my hand, and I dialed the one person I knew would understand and, more importantly, would act. "Brenda," I said when she answered. "It's Linda. I need to sell the house. Fast." Brenda answered on the second ring, her voice already caffeinated and sharp as a tack. "Linda Jean, is the world on fire?" That was Brenda's standard greeting. She was a tiny woman, not even 5 feet tall, but she had the energy of a Category 5 hurricane.
She'd been my best friend since we were in brownies together, and she had the loyalty of a junkyard dog. "You could say that, Bren. I need you," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. "I need to sell my house. Today." There was a moment of silence on the line, which, from Brenda, was more shocking than a string of curse words. Then, a low, dangerous growl. What did that ungrateful little monster do now? She didn't need to ask who I meant. She'd been watching the slow-motion, hostile takeover of my life for 5 years, her lips pressed into a thinner and thinner line each time I made an excuse for Mark or Tiffany. I told her everything. The armchair, his shouting, the final, brutal command, "It's time for you to move out." "Okay," Brenda said, and the single word was laced with steel. "Don't move. Don't talk to them. I'll be there in 20 minutes with coffee and a plan." 20 minutes later, her cherry red convertible squealed into my driveway, and she marched to the door holding a tray with 2 large coffees and a box from the Good Bakery downtown. She wore a tailored crimson pantsuit that made her look like the CEO of a small, aggressive nation. She breezed past me into the kitchen, setting the things down on the counter that Tiffany had declared artistically barren. Brenda took one look at my husband's armchair back in its rightful place and nodded. "Good. The fort has not been surrendered." Then she turned to me, her eyes laser-focused. "Here's the situation as I see it. You can't just list the house. Mark has residency here, even if he's a glorified squatter. If he gets wind of it, he and that lacquer-haired girlfriend of his could make this legally messy. We have to be fast, faster than fast. We need a strike so clean and so quick they don't know what hit them until they're lying on the canvas." I took a sip of the coffee she handed me. It was strong and hot and felt like courage pouring into my veins. "What are you suggesting, Bren?" "I'm suggesting we skip the market altogether," she said, her eyes gleaming. "I'm suggesting we don't list, we don't stage, we don't even put a sign up until the ink is dry. I have a buyer, a cash buyer, a family that lost out on 3 bidding wars in this school district and is desperate. They're pre-approved up to $1 million. Your house is worth $850 easy, even as is. We call them, we offer it for $800 flat if they can sign and wire the money before 3 p.m. today. A clean, simple, brutal transaction." I nearly choked on my coffee. "Today? Brenda, is that even possible?" She just smiled, a sharp, knowing smile. "Linda, honey, you called the most aggressive realtor in town. It's my specialty." I could barely believe what she was suggesting, but a fire had been lit. They thought I was old and weak. They were about to learn a very hard lesson. You'll want to see how Brenda pulled this off. And so began the busiest, most terrifying, and most liberating day of my life. While Mark was at his tech job creating whatever synergistic doohickey he did all day, Brenda and I were executing a full-scale domestic blitzkrieg. Brenda got on the phone with her buyers, the Garcia family. I could hear her side of the conversation, a masterclass in sales and psychology. "Jim, it's Brenda. Stop what you're doing. The universe just handed you your house. Yes, that neighborhood.
Here's the catch, and it's the beautiful part. The owner wants out now. No contingencies, no inspection, cash deal. $800,000. You have 1 hour to walk through and say yes. I suggest you say yes. While she worked her magic, she gave me my orders. Linda, pack your essentials. And I don't just mean your toothbrush. Pack your soul. Anything you can't bear to lose, anything that screams David, anything that is irreplaceably you. Your photo albums, your good jewelry, your mother's china, David's toolbox. Whatever fits in your car, we're getting it all out. The next few hours were a blur of cardboard boxes and bittersweet memories. I went through the house like a wraith, claiming the pieces of my life. I carefully wrapped the porcelain nativity set my mother brought over from Italy. I packed the faded photograph of David and me on our wedding day, his smile so young and hopeful. I went down to the basement to David's workshop that had been defiled into a gym. I opened his heavy wooden tool chest, and the scent of sawdust and linseed oil filled the air. My husband could fix or build anything. I took his favorite hand plane, its wooden handle worn smooth and dark from his grip. Tears streamed down my face as I wrapped it in a towel. I wasn't just packing things. I was rescuing the physical remnants of my life with him, the things Tiffany had called clutter. At precisely 11:30 a.m., a minivan pulled up. Out piled Jim and Maria Garcia and their 5 children, ranging from about 4 to 16. They were a whirlwind of noise and energy. The kids immediately exploded into the backyard, claiming territory and yelling about a swing set. Maria, a warm woman with kind eyes and a frazzled but happy energy, walked into my living room. She took in the worn armchair, the mismatched furniture, the photos on the mantel. She looked right at me and smiled. "This house has a happy feeling," she said. "It feels like a home." I nearly burst into tears right there. They didn't see outdated or junk. They saw love. They walked through the whole house in 15 minutes. And Jim, a man who looked as solid and reliable as my David had, shook Brenda's hand. "We'll take it," he said. By 2 p.m., we were all sitting around my dining room table with a mobile notary Brenda had summoned. I signed the deed of sale, my hand shaking only slightly. Mr. Garcia signed the transfer confirmation from his bank on a laptop right there. It was done. The house I had lived in for 40 years was no longer mine. Brenda handed me the keys to a short-term luxury apartment she'd already arranged, fully furnished. "Your new command center," she called it. As the Garcias were signing the last papers, their oldest son shouted from the front yard, "Hey, Dad, the U-Haul's here." My eyes widened, and I looked at Brenda. She had a smirk on her face. I told them to have it on standby around the corner, just in case they said yes. The Garcias hadn't just come to look, they had come to move. I knew what Mark and Tiffany would come home to would be absolute chaos, but it was a fire of their own making. He was about to get exactly what he deserved, and I had a front row seat. Don't go anywhere. With the keys to my temporary new life in my purse and my car packed to the gills with the things that truly mattered, I gave Maria Garcia a hug. "Be happy here," I whispered. She squeezed me tight. "We will," she said. "Thank you for trusting us with it." Brenda practically shoved me out the door. "Go, go, go! Take up your post!" My post was a parking spot across the street with a perfect view of the driveway. Brenda's cherry red convertible was parked right behind me. We had a thermos of my favorite tea and the bakery box. And so we sat, like 2 snipers on a stakeout. The scene at my old house was one of magnificent mayhem. The Garcia kids and their friends were now running through the sprinklers in the front yard. 2 of the older boys were wrestling with the components of a massive basketball hoop on the driveway. The aforementioned trampoline was partially assembled. Their 3 beagle mix dogs were joyfully barking at every passing car. The moving truck was backed up to the front door, and a steady stream of mismatched furniture was making its way inside. It was loud, it was messy, and it was gloriously, beautifully alive. At 5:42 p.m., I saw it. The sleek, silent, soulless gray of Mark's Tesla turned onto our street. "Showtime," Brenda whispered, pulling a pair of binoculars out of her glove compartment. My heart hammered against my ribs, a cocktail of fear and giddy anticipation. He was home. Mark's Tesla glided to a stop at the curb, its electric motor uncannily silent amidst the cacophony erupting from his childhood home. He stepped out, already looking irritated. Mark hated messes, and the scene before him was the absolute definition of one. He saw the overflowing U-Haul, the kids yelling, the dogs barking, the basketball hoop components strewn across his usual parking spot. His perfectly sculpted expression of annoyance slowly melted into confusion. His eyes scanned the chaos, and I could see the wheels turning in his head. He probably thought I'd finally cracked, maybe hired a landscaping crew from hell, or decided to host a chaotic charity event without telling him. Then he saw the sign. It was hammered in the center of the lawn, a bold crimson slash against the green I had so carefully tended. Brenda had made sure it was the biggest one they had. I watched through the binoculars as his eyes locked onto the 4 simple letters, S-O-L-D. His jaw didn't just slacken, it literally dropped. His expensive phone, which he was in the process of raising to his ear, slipped from his grasp and clattered onto the asphalt. He stood frozen for a full 10 seconds, a statue of disbelief. He finally snapped out of it and marched towards the house, weaving through the chaos like a man possessed. He went right for the front door, where a large, solid-looking man was directing 2 movers carrying a ridiculously oversized sofa. This was Jim Garcia. "Excuse me, what the hell is going on here?" Mark demanded, his voice high-pitched and incredulous. Jim Garcia, who was probably good 3 inches taller and 50 pounds heavier than my son, turned slowly. He had the calm, unbothered air of a man used to managing chaos. "Can I help you?" he asked, his tone perfectly reasonable.
"What do you mean, can you help me? This is my house. Who are you people?" Mark's voice was escalating into a near shriek. Mr. Garcia just looked at him, then at the house, then back at Mark. "Sorry, son, I think you're mistaken. My family and I bought this house. We closed this afternoon." He even held up a set of keys with a bright yellow Home Sweet Home keychain Brenda had thoughtfully provided. The color drained from Mark's face. He started sputtering, No, that's impossible. My mother lives here. Linda, you can't have, this is illegal." "She's the one who sold it to us," Mr. Garcia said, his patience clearly starting to wear thin as he gestured for the movers to continue. "Now, if you'll excuse me, this couch isn't getting any lighter." And with that, he turned his back on my son and guided the sofa through the front door of what was now his home. Mark just stood there on the porch, utterly defeated, looking small and insignificant. Brenda passed me the box of bakery cookies. "Have a celebratory macaron," she said dryly. Just then, a pristine white SUV pulled up behind Mark's Tesla. Tiffany. She got out looking like she'd just stepped out of a magazine photo shoot, all beige and cream and expensive sunglasses. She took one look at the scene and her perfectly painted lips curled into a sneer. "Mark, what is all this tacky commotion? Did your mother hire carnies?" Mark rushed over to her, grabbing her arm, and I could see his frantic explanations. Her posture stiffened. She whipped her sunglasses off, and her cold eyes swept across the yard, the house, and finally, just as Mark's had, landed on the sold sign. Her reaction wasn't shock or disbelief. It was pure, unadulterated fury. She didn't march toward the house, she stormed. She aimed herself at Maria, who was trying to corral a toddler and one of the dogs near the porch steps. "You," Tiffany snapped, pointing a long, manicured finger at Maria. "Who do you think you are? You need to pack up your things and get off this property immediately." Maria, bless her heart, simply picked up her toddler, settled him on her hip, and looked Tiffany up and down with an expression that could have curdled milk. I'm sorry, I don't believe we've been introduced. I'm Maria Garcia. This is my house now. The sheer, unapologetic ownership in her voice was a thing of beauty. I know this part is hard to imagine, the sheer audacity of it all, but it's important. The truth about who Mark and Tiffany really were was coming out for the whole neighborhood to see, and it was going to be glorious. Tiffany actually scoffed. Your house? This is our house. We live here. I have a walk-in closet full of Chanel upstairs. I think you are very, very confused. The only thing confused here, sweetheart, Brenda muttered next to me, is your understanding of property law. Before Maria could respond, Mark caught up, looking desperate. Tiff, calm down. Let's just figure this out. But Tiffany wasn't listening. She was pulling out her phone. I'm calling the police, she announced loudly, to no one in particular. There are trespassers on our property. That's when Mark saw us. His eyes scanned the street and locked onto my familiar sedan. I saw his face shift from panicked confusion to white-hot rage. He left Tiffany to her performative 911 call and began stalking across the street towards us. Brenda calmly took another sip of tea. Here we go. Battle stations. He wrenched my car door open without even knocking. The cool evening air flooded the car, carrying his anger with it. What did you do? He roared, his face a mottled, ugly red. Are you senile? Have you lost your mind? I looked at him calmly. The fear I thought I would feel wasn't there. All I felt was a strange, serene sense of power. Hello, Mark, I said, my voice as even as a frozen lake. You're creating a scene. A scene? A scene? You sold my home right out from under me. Our things are in there. Tiffany's clothes are in there. Where are we supposed to go? My home, Mark, I corrected gently. It was always my home, the one I owned, the one you were living in for free for 5 years. And if you'll recall our conversation from this morning, you told me to move out. You were very clear on that point. So I did. I have moved out. He stared at me, his mouth opening and closing like a fish on a dock. The logic was so simple, so direct, that his rage-addled brain couldn't process it. He had truly believed he held all the cards, but he was about to learn that a 67-year-old woman with nothing left to lose is the most dangerous player at the table. You can't just sell it, he stammered.
Oh, but I can, I said, holding up my purse. Deed is signed, money is in the bank. It was a very clean transaction. I got a good price, too. A lovely family. Tiffany, having apparently failed to get the police interested in her home invasion, had followed him and was now standing by the open car door, her face a mask of disbelief and contempt. You owe us, she hissed at me. We put 5 years of our lives into that house. The equity Mark helped build. Brenda finally spoke up, leaning over me from the passenger seat. Her voice was pure ice. Honey, the only equity you two have is in your acai bowl loyalty card. You were tenants who failed to pay rent. Now, your personal belongings are on what is now the private property of the Garcia family. I would suggest you speak to them very, very nicely about arranging a time to retrieve them. And I would suggest you do it before they change the locks. She gave Tiffany a razor-sharp smile. Have a lovely evening. With that, I turned the key in the ignition. The engine purred to life. For a moment, Mark just stood there, blocking the door. I looked my son in the eye, the little boy I had brought home from the hospital, the man he had become, and I felt a pang of something, not pity, but a deep, mournful sadness for what we had lost. Then it passed. Close the door, Mark, I said. It wasn't a request. He dumbly took a step back and did as he was told. I put the car in drive and pulled away from the curb, leaving my son and his girlfriend standing on the sidewalk, homeless, while their future, the one they had planned to build on top of my life, was being rearranged by strangers right before their eyes. In the rearview mirror, I saw the Garcia family's golden retriever trot up and lick Mark's hand. He didn't even notice. We drove for about 10 minutes in a profound silence, broken only by the hum of the engine and the occasional sniffle, which I was surprised to realize was coming from me. The adrenaline of the past 24 hours was draining away, leaving behind a hollow, aching space. Brenda reached over and squeezed my hand, her grip surprisingly strong. "You okay, Linda Jean?" she asked softly. "I don't know what I am," I admitted, my voice thick. "I feel powerful and terrified and heartbroken. Is that possible?" "Honey," she said, navigating a turn with one hand, "that's the holy trinity of reclaiming your life. It means you're doing it right." We pulled into the underground garage of a sleek, modern building downtown called the Ashton. It was the kind of place Tiffany would have killed to live in, which gave me a small, wicked thrill. Brenda led me to the elevator and up to the 7th floor. The apartment she'd arranged was stunning. It wasn't home, not by a long shot. It was too new, too sterile, smelling of fresh paint and builder's-grade carpet. But it had huge windows that looked out over the city lights, a kitchen with appliances that probably needed a computer science degree to operate, and most importantly, it was quiet. It was safe. It was mine. I walked over to the floor-to-ceiling window and looked down at the bustling city below. It felt like I was in a spaceship looking at a foreign planet. For 40 years, my view had been my rose garden and the big oak tree David and I had planted when Mark was born. "They'll try to get their stuff, Brenda said, coming to stand beside me. "They'll have to arrange it with the Garcias. It will be humiliating for them. I hope Maria makes them grovel." I nodded, my thoughts elsewhere. "He's my son, Bren, my baby boy. How did we get here?" Brenda put an arm around my shoulder. "You didn't get here, Lynn. He did. He chose this path when he decided your love was a resource to be exploited, instead of a gift to be cherished. You just finally stopped letting him walk all over you." We spent the next hour bringing my boxes in from the car. It wasn't much, just a handful of boxes containing the concentrated essence of my life. I unwrapped David's hand plane and set it on the polished granite of the kitchen island. It looked so out of place, a relic from a handmade life sitting in this machine-made world. I ran my thumb over the worn wood, and a fresh wave of grief washed over me. I wasn't just grieving my husband. I was grieving the son I thought I had raised, the one who held my hand at his father's funeral and promised to take care of me. That boy was gone. In his place was a stranger who saw me as an obstacle, a stranger I just made homeless. I finally sat down on a packing box and let myself cry. Brenda didn't say a word. She just made us a cup of tea and a strange new mug and sat with me until the tears ran dry. My phone rang at exactly 8:15 p.m. The caller ID flashed Mark. My stomach did a flip-flop. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to throw the phone against the wall. But that was the old Linda. The new Linda answered. "Hello, Mark," I said.
The voice that came through the speaker was not the furious roar from the roadside. It was a low, seething hiss. "You have exactly 1 hour to call those people and tell them the sale is a mistake, that you were not of sound mind," he said. "You will reverse this, or I swear to God, I will take you to court and have you declared incompetent." The sheer audacity of it stole my breath. There was no apology, no remorse, just threats and demands. And that, right there, was the moment the last of my grief for the son I'd lost evaporated and was replaced by a cold, hard certainty. They thought they could bully me, that I would crumble and reverse course under pressure, but they had no idea I was just getting started. Stick with me, because they were about to find out how incompetent I really was. I took a deep breath. "No, Mark, I don't think I will be doing that."
"Mom, don't be a fool. Listen to me," he hissed. "You've been manipulated. Your old biddy friend put you up to this. She took advantage of you." I almost laughed. "Brenda is my friend, Mark. A true friend. The kind who helps you move. You should try having one of those sometime. As for being of sound mind, I have a notary who can attest that I was perfectly lucid when I signed the paperwork for the $800,000 that are now sitting in my bank account." I heard a sharp intake of breath. He hadn't known the number. Silence stretched for a moment. Then I heard Tiffany's shrill voice in the background. 800? Ask her where the money is. That's our money." Mark's voice came back, laced with Tiffany's venom. "That money? You can't just keep it. We have to be compensated. The market value of that house is way higher. We poured money and sweat into that place. We oversaw contractors for the kitchen." "You mean the contractors I paid for?" I asked, my voice dangerously sweet. "The overseeing where Tiffany criticized their tile choices while drinking a latte and you were in the basement working out? That's not called sweat equity, Mark. That's called being a nuisance." "This is not over," he snarled. "This is so not over. You will be hearing from our lawyer." And then he hung up. I set the phone down on the counter. My hand was steady. My heart was calm. Brenda looked at me, raising an eyebrow. "Lawyer, huh? Let me guess. He wants to sue you for his equity." "Something like that," I said. Just as Brenda was about to speak, my phone rang again. A number I didn't recognize. I hesitated, then answered and put it on speaker. "Is this Linda?" The voice was female, sharp, and dripping with condescension. It was Tiffany. "This is she," I said. "Listen to me very carefully, you vindictive old woman." There it was. The mask was completely off. "Mark might be your son, so he's trying to be delicate. I am not. That house was our future. The money you stole from that sale is 50% mine. I am being generous. If you do not wire half of that money to our account by tomorrow morning, our lawyer will not just be suing you for compensation, we will be seeking to have you institutionalized." This time, Brenda didn't wait. She snatched the phone off the counter. "Hello, Tiffany. This is Brenda Walsh of Walsh & Associates Realty, Linda's agent and representative. I believe I am also the old biddy you referred to a moment ago. Let me be unequivocally clear so you don't waste your personal shopping money on a lawyer who'll just laugh in your face." Brenda's voice had dropped to a temperature that could cause frostbite. 1. Linda was the sole owner of the property at 125 Oak Street. Her name, and her name only, was on the deed. 2. You were, for all legal intents and purposes, month-to-month tenants of sufferance. That's a fancy term for guests who have overstayed their welcome and pay no rent. 3. Any improvements were made so without a contract for reimbursement and are considered gifts. And 4. The threat to have someone institutionalized in an attempt to extort them from money is a criminal offense in this state. It can be prosecuted. This call is being recorded. A dead, echoing silence came from the other end of the line. Brenda smiled fiercely at me. "Are we clear, Tiffany? Or do you need me to use smaller words?" There was a choking sound, and then the line went dead. Brenda handed the phone back to me. "I don't think you'll be hearing from them for a little while."
I sank onto one of the modern bar stools, a real laugh bubbling up from my chest. It was a raw, cathartic sound. I laughed until tears streamed down my cheeks again, but these weren't tears of grief. They were tears of pure, unadulterated relief. The poison had been drained. For 5 years, I had been carrying the weight of their entitlement and disrespect, and now I was free. Brenda opened a bottle of wine she'd brought, and we toasted. We toasted to new beginnings, to good friends, and to the exquisite silence of a phone that was no longer ringing. The week that followed was a strange combination of surreal tranquility and tense anticipation. It was like living in the eye of a hurricane. In my quiet, modern apartment, I felt a peace I hadn't realized I was missing for years. I could make my coffee just the way I liked it, leave a book open on the sofa, and sit in utter silence. There were no passive-aggressive sighs from the kitchen, no blaring televisions in the living room, no one making me feel like a guest in my own life. Brenda insisted I treat it like a vacation. We explored my new neighborhood. I discovered a wonderful little bookstore with a fat, fluffy cat that slept on the counter. I found a farmer's market in the park on Saturday mornings. For the first time in 6 years, I felt like a person again. Not just a caretaker, a landlord, or an obstacle. But underneath it all, I knew the other side of the storm was coming. Mark and Tiffany were not the type to slink away quietly. They were a cornered animal, and cornered animals are always the most vicious. The first sign came not as a roar, but as a whisper. My phone rang on Wednesday. It was Carol, my bridge partner. "Linda, honey, are you all right?" she asked, her voice oozing with a practiced, concerned tone that I knew was a prelude to gossip. "I'm fine, Carol. Better than fine, actually. Why do you ask?" "Oh, well," she drew the words out. "I ran into that lovely Tiffany at the grocery store. She was just distraught. She told me the most awful story about how you had some sort of episode and sold the house right out from under them, threw your own son out on the street. She said they're terribly worried about you, that they're trying to get you help." The cold, calculated brilliance of it hit me like a ton of bricks. Of course. They weren't going to play the villains. They were going to play the concerned, loving children of a poor, senile old woman who had gone off the deep end. They were poisoning the well, turning my own friends and neighbors against me before I had a chance to tell my side. "Carol," I said, my voice steady, "let me ask you something. In the 30 years you've known me, have I ever struck you as the type to have an episode?" There was a pause. "Well, no, of course not, but—" "Then I need you to trust that there is much more to this story than what Tiffany is peddling between the produce and dairy aisles," I finished, a little more sharply than I intended. To her credit, Carol had the decency to sound abashed. By the time we hung up, I think I had her back on my side, but it was draining. I had spent 40 years building a reputation in that community, and they were trying to tear it down in a matter of days. The next attack was far more direct. A week after the sale, a certified letter arrived. It was from a law firm I'd never heard of, Grabowski and Associates, which sounded more like a plumbing company than a legal practice. The letter was 5 pages of dense, threatening legalese, but the gist of it was clear. It accused me of unjust enrichment, financial elder abuse, the irony was breathtaking, and acting under the undue influence of Brenda Walsh. It claimed that my son and his fiancée had invested significant sweat equity and financial resources into the home's upkeep, and the sale constituted a malicious and calculated act to defraud them of their rightful share of the property. It concluded by demanding a settlement of $400,000, exactly 50% of the sale price, to be paid within 30 days, or they would proceed with a lawsuit that would see my assets frozen and my mental competency formally challenged in court. I read it twice, then calmly picked up my phone and called Brenda. "Well, the jackals are officially at the gate," I said, "and they've sent their biggest hyena. He thought his lawsuit was the ultimate trump card. He believed he could bury me in legal fees and scare me to submission. But what he didn't count on was that in clearing out my old life, I was about to open a Pandora's box of his own making. We thought we were just defending against a frivolous lawsuit. We had no idea we were about to uncover a level of betrayal that would make everything else look like child's play. What I found in my bank statements would change everything."
Brenda came over with a file folder and the name of a lawyer she trusted, a woman named Anita Desai, who was known for being a shark in a silk blouse. "Don't you worry about this garbage," Brenda said, tapping the threatening letter with a blood-red fingernail. "This is a bluff, a shot across the bow designed to scare you. We'll get Anita on it tomorrow. She eats guys like Grabowski for breakfast." But something about the letter bothered me, specifically the line about their significant financial resources invested in the house. It was such a blatant, provable lie. I paid for everything. The new water heater, the roof repairs, the kitchen remodel, it all came out of my account. I had the receipts and the bank statements to prove it. "I want to have everything ready for this lawyer," I told Brenda, pulling my laptop onto the new kitchen counter. "I'm going to go through the last 5 years of my bank and credit card statements. I'm going to document every single household expense I paid. I want to show this Anita Desai exactly how financially invested my son was." "Good idea," Brenda said, topping up our wine glasses. "Let's bury them in paperwork." So I began. For the next 2 days, I lived in a world of online banking portals and digital statements. It started innocently enough. I downloaded the PDFs year by year and started highlighting anything related to home maintenance. It was tedious work, but with every highlighted entry for Home Depot or Pete's Plumbing, my resolve hardened. I found the $15,000 I'd paid for the kitchen remodel they claimed to have overseen. I found the $8,000 for the new furnace 2 winters ago. I found the endless, massive grocery bills from upscale markets I never shopped at, the soaring utility payments, the property taxes. By the time I was done, I had an ironclad case showing that, far from investing in the house, they had systematically drained my resources for 60 consecutive months. It was damning, but it wasn't the discovery that would change the game. The discovery came when I decided to check my credit report, just to be thorough. Brenda had suggested it. If they were desperate for money, you never know. I went to the official government site and pulled all 3 reports. And there, under the list of open credit lines between my one trusty department store card and my gas card, was an account I didn't recognize. A Prestige Visa card issued by a major national bank. It had been opened 18 months ago. My name was on it. My social security number was attached to it. The mailing address was my home on Oak Street, and it had an outstanding balance of $42,651.12. My blood ran cold. I clicked to see the transaction history. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely control the mouse. Page after page of charges scrolled by. A $2,000 handbag from Chanel, a $5,000 weekend trip to a spa resort in Napa, endless charges at high-end restaurants in the city, hundreds of dollars a pop at a store called Luxe Baby Boutique. That last one hit me like a physical blow. Tiffany wasn't just my son's girlfriend, she was his fiancée, according to their ridiculous lawsuit. Were they expecting? Using my credit to fund a lifestyle they couldn't afford and prepare for a family I knew nothing about? This wasn't about being ungrateful anymore. This wasn't about living rent-free. This was a felony identity theft. Mark had taken my personal information, my good name, the perfect credit score I had spent my entire adult life building, and he had used it to rack up a small mountain of debt in secret. The lawsuit wasn't a desperate cash grab. It was a cover-up. They were probably hoping to use the settlement money to pay off the secret debt they'd run up in my name before I ever found out. The absolute soul-crushing treachery of it left me breathless. They hadn't just disrespected me, they had stolen from me. They had committed a crime against me, and they had just threatened to sue me. The hyena had walked right into the lion's cage and slammed the door shut behind him. The rage that filled me was so pure, so cold, it felt like my blood had turned to ice.
For a moment, I couldn't breathe. My 67-year-old heart, which David had always told me was too soft for this world, beat a hard, furious rhythm against my ribs. This was a betrayal on a scale I couldn't have imagined. $42,000. Tiffany Chanel bag, the spa trips, the baby boutique, it all clicked into place with a horrifying clarity.
Their sense of entitlement hadn't been an attitude. It had been a strategy. They weren't just waiting for me to die. They were actively profiting from me while I was alive, treating my identity as their personal slush fund. My first instinct was primal. I wanted to call Mark and scream, to let loose a torrent of pain and fury that would burn the phone lines. But then a voice, calm and clear and sounding suspiciously like Brenda, echoed in my head. Don't tip your hand. This was no longer a messy family drama to be sorted out with tears and shouting matches. This was evidence. This was a loaded gun, and they had just handed it to me. I took a deep, shuddering breath, saved a PDF of the credit card statement, and printed 3 copies. Then I made 2 phone calls. The first was to Anita Desai, the lawyer. "Anita," I said, my voice dangerously calm. "Linda, our consultation tomorrow just became a strategy session. I'm emailing you a document. I believe the legal term for what my son has done is felony identity theft." The second call was to Brenda. "Bren," I said, "change of plans. Forget the wine. Tomorrow morning, you and I are going on a little field trip, and you're going to love our destination." The next morning, Brenda picked me up in her red convertible. The top was down and the morning air was crisp. I was dressed not in my usual comfortable retiree attire, but in my best navy blue pantsuit, my "don't mess with me" outfit I usually reserved for fighting with the cable company. In my handbag were the printed credit card statements and the certified letter from Grabowski and Associates. "Okay, spill," Brenda said as she navigated downtown traffic. "You sound like a woman who's just discovered her nemesis's secret weakness." I laid it all out for her. The secret credit card, the charges, the baby store. She had to pull the car over. She took off her sunglasses and just stared at me. "That absolute snake," she whispered, her voice filled with a mixture of horror and awe. "That's not just a lawsuit, Linda. That's a motive. They sued you to get the money to pay off the card they opened illegally in your name. It's almost brilliant in how disgustingly evil it is." "Almost," I agreed. "But they made one mistake. They got caught." "So where are we going?" she asked as she pulled back onto the road. "Anita Desai's office?" "First," I said with a thin smile, "we're going to the police station." Walking into the downtown precinct was one of the hardest things I've ever done. The whole place smelled of stale coffee and bureaucratic indifference. I felt like a foolish old woman, another victim of a family squabble, but I clutched my handbag and walked up to the front desk. I asked to speak to a detective in the financial crimes unit. I was sure they would dismiss me, tell me it was a civil matter, but they didn't. A detective named Miller, a tired-looking man in his 40s with kind, weary eyes, led us to a small, cluttered office. I laid out my story calmly and methodically. I explained the living situation, the threats, and the lawsuit. Then I placed the credit card statements and the lawyer's letter on his desk. As Detective Miller read through the pages of fraudulent charges, his weary expression sharpened into one of genuine interest. He looked from the statement to me. "And you're certain you never authorized this card, Mrs. Evans?" "Detective," I said. "The last time I went to a spa, Richard Nixon was president. I have never and will never own a $2,000 handbag. And as for the baby clothes, I wasn't even aware I was in line to be a grandmother until I saw these charges." He nodded slowly, his eyes lingering on the lawyer's letter.
So your son and his fiancée fraudulently open a line of credit in your name, max it out, and when you unexpectedly sell the house, their presumed inheritance, they preemptively sue you for half the money to cover the debt they illegally created, all under the guise of being the wronged party. That's about the size of it, Brenda piped in. Detective Miller leaned back in his chair. "Ma'am," he said to me, "this isn't just a crime. This is a special kind of scummy. You're doing the right thing. We'll open an investigation immediately. The bank will cooperate. They'll have the original application with the signature on file. We'll pull security footage for the bigger purchases if we can. This is a very clean case."
Leaving that police station, I felt 10 feet tall. The decision to report my own son to the police was agonizing, a violation of every maternal instinct I possessed. But he had left me no choice. He had declared war, and I was going to use every weapon at my disposal to win it. I knew he was about to get exactly what he deserved, and for the first time, I felt a spark of pleasure at the thought. From the police station, we went straight to Anita Desai's office. She was everything Brenda had promised, sharp, impeccably dressed, and possessing an aura of intimidating competence. She had already reviewed the documents I'd sent. She listened to the story about our visit to the police, her expression unreadable. When I finished, she tented her fingers and looked at me. "Linda, we have them. Cold. The lawsuit is a work of fiction, a frivolous and malicious action designed to intimidate you. But the fraud is an atomic bomb. We're no longer playing defense. We're on the attack." She laid out the plan. It was simple, it was brutal, and it was perfect. Anita would draft a response to Mr. Grabowski. It would not only reject their settlement demand, but would include a counter-demand. It would lay out, in excruciating detail, every single expense I had paid on Mark and Tiffany's behalf for the last 5 years, calculated to the penny. It would demand they pay me back rent, utilities, and grocery costs, totaling a figure I was stunned to see was well over $60,000. And then, for the grand finale, the last paragraph would mention the $42,000 fraudulent credit card and note that a formal criminal complaint had been filed with the police department, case number and detective's name included. "We are giving them one chance," Anita explained, a predatory gleam in her eye. "They will drop their lawsuit, sign a document renouncing any and all future claims against you or your estate, and agree to a payment plan for the $60,000 they owe you. If they do that, you will consider speaking to the district attorney about leniency regarding the felony charges that are likely coming their way. They have 48 hours to accept." It was checkmate. We had them trapped between a lawsuit they could never win and a criminal conviction that would ruin their lives. We sent the response via courier that very afternoon. Then there was nothing to do but wait for the explosion. It didn't take long. What do you think he did? The full truth of his response and the fallout from our counterattack was even more shocking than I could have prepared for. You won't want to miss the final chapter of this saga. Let's finish the story. The phone call came 26 hours later, not from Mr. Grabowski, but from Mark. The arrogant, demanding tone was gone. In its place was a voice I hadn't heard in years, the voice of a terrified little boy. "Mom," he said, his voice cracking, "we got a letter from your lawyer. Mom, you can't be serious. Jail time? A felony?" "Hello, Mark," I said, my own voice betraying no emotion. Anita had coached me for this call. "I was perfectly serious when I asked you to help with the bills. I was serious when I told you how much your father's chair meant to me. You are the one who has never taken me seriously. It seems we have finally found a way to get your attention." "Mom, please," he begged, and I could hear Tiffany sobbing hysterically in the background. "This was all a mistake, a misunderstanding. We were going to pay you back. We just got in over our heads." The lies were so reflexive, so practiced. "Mark, you committed a crime. You stole from me. You and Tiffany used my good name to fund a lifestyle you couldn't afford. And then you had the gall to sue me when the Bank of Mom closed? This isn't a misunderstanding. This is a consequence. What do you want? He whispered, his voice hoarse. What will make this go away? Anita's letter was very clear. You will drop that ridiculous lawsuit, you will sign away any claim to my estate, and you will arrange to pay back every cent you leached from me over the last 5 years. Do that, and I will tell the DA that my son made a terrible, foolish mistake, and I would prefer not to see him go to prison. Refuse, and I paused, letting the silence hang heavy. I won't lift a finger to help you. What happened next was a flurry of legal activity. Mr. Grabowski, likely horrified to find his clients had used him as a pawn in their felony fraud scheme, dropped them like a hot rock. A chastened Mark and Tiffany appeared at Anita Desai's office 2 days later with a public defender and signed everything we put in front of them. The document they signed was a work of art. It not only fulfilled my terms, but included a non-disclosure clause preventing them from ever speaking publicly about me or the events that transpired, effectively killing their poor senile mother narrative for good.
I did speak to the district attorney as promised. Given their cooperation, the fact that they were first-time offenders, and my stated preference for restitution over retribution, he agreed to reduce the charges. They weren't going to prison. Instead, they were sentenced to 5 years of probation, 500 hours of community service each, and a court-ordered financial restitution plan. On top of the $60,000 they had to pay me, they now had to repay the $42,000 to the credit card company. They were buried in a mountain of debt of their own creation. The last I heard, Mark lost his high-paying tech job because of the felony conviction. They had to sell his Tesla and her designer bags. They moved into a cramped, run-down apartment an hour out of the city, the kind of place they probably would have sneered at a year ago. Tiffany did not, in fact, have a Chanel-filled closet anymore, and there was no baby. The purchases from Luxe Baby Boutique turned out to be for an elaborate baby shower gift for one of her wealthy clients. Another pathetic attempt to keep up appearances. Their grand future, built on a foundation of my life's work, had crumbled into dust. As for me, I am thriving. The big, empty house on Oak Street was just that, a house. It was a container for memories, but the memories were inside of me, not inside the walls. My new apartment has become a home. I filled it with pictures of David, with books, and with good friends. With the proceeds from the sale, I am secure and free. I've been traveling, something David and I always wanted to do. I sent Brenda a postcard from Italy last month, from the village my mother was born in. I stood in a sun-drenched piazza, eating a gelato, and I smiled. My son's betrayal was the most painful experience of my life. It cut out a part of my heart that will never grow back. But it also forced me to find a strength I never knew I had. They saw a weak old woman, a stepping stone for their own ambitions. What they found was a mother who, when pushed to the absolute limit, remembered that she was also a survivor. They made a fatal error in judgment. They forgot that the quietest people often have the most steel in their spine. They yelled at me to get out of the way. And in the end, I did exactly that. I got out of their way and let them career straight into the wall they had built for themselves. What would you have done if you were in my shoes? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Thanks for coming along on this wild ride with me.
So, another story of my grandmother has end, and be clicking here, you will have when more such stories.